The fleet that launched for Earth was a patchwork of desperation. Ships were scavenged from asteroid haulers, colony transports, and broken war relics welded back into service. Their hulls bore mismatched armor, their weapons stitched together, from whatever could fire. But when they aligned under a single banner, when their engines roared in unison, the void trembled with something greater than metal. Resolve. Operation Dawnfire had begun. Daniel Rourke stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie. 2, a warship cobbled together from 3 wrecked cruisers. Its systems rattled with every hyperspace jump, but Daniel's hand on the command rail steadied everyone who saw him. His face was worn, his voice hoarse, but his presence was iron. "Earth is ours," he told the crew. "We take it back, or we die giving it a reason to remember us." The fleet broke through the asteroid belt and met the first wave of Zerath defenders. Monstrous carriers unfolded from orbit, blotting out the sun with their wings. Their energy lances lit the void, carving through human frigates in sheets of fire. Dozens of ships died in the opening minutes, and yet humanity pressed forward. Daniel's tactics were reckless genius. Mining barges fitted with reactor bombs hurtled into enemy lines, detonating in blinding novas that ripped apart formations. Small corvettes darted like gnats, striking engines and slipping into the blind spots of Zerath giants. From Earth's surface, hidden resistance cells rose up, sabotaging planetary defenses and sending coded beacons to guide the fleet through orbital kill zones. The battle became chaos. Explosions stitched the sky, lighting oceans and continents, below with unnatural dawn. Daniel drove the Valkyrie 2 straight into the heart of it, targeting the command vessels that coordinated Zerath fleets. "Cut off the head," he barked. "The body dies with it." One by one, human forces sacrificed everything to clear the path. A freighter rammed a battleship broadside. A squadron of fighters dove into enemy cannons, detonating warheads point blank. Blood and fire wrote a story across the void that no one would ever forget. And then, the shadow fell. Farthest had arrived. Her flagship, the Obsidian Crown, slid into orbit like a blade unsheathed. 8 kilometers long, armored in black steel, and living bone, its presence alone crushed morale. Its weapons tore through human ranks, each volley scattering dozens of ships. Resistance across Earth faltered under her arrival. She appeared on every channel, her image towering and terrible. "This is your final hour," she declared, her golden eyes burning. "Submit, and I will allow a remnant to live as slaves. Resist, and I will scour your homeworld to ashes." For a moment, silence choked the fleet. Hope wavered. Then Daniel's voice cut through. "You said we were vermin. You said we were nothing. But look around you, Farthest. Your empire bleeds. Because of us. You laughed once. You're not laughing now." The words spread like wildfire across comms, steadying terrified hands, pushing shattered crews back into the fight. Humanity answered not with surrender, but with a storm of fire. Daniel made the choice no sane commander would. He ordered the Valkyrie 2 on a collision course with the Obsidian Crown. The ship shuddered as engines overloaded, alarms screaming. Officers begged him to reconsider, but his voice was final. "If we break their queen, we break their spine. Ready the ramming run." The Valkyrie 2 tore through waves of fighters and escort craft, its hull burning, its guns firing until barrels melted. Enemy fire shredded decks, but the ship refused to fall. It roared forward, a dying star aimed at a throne. On the bridge, Daniel gripped the rail, calm amid the chaos. "For Earth," he whispered. Impact. The collision was apocalyptic. Human steel met Zerath bone, tearing open the Obsidian Crown in an explosion that lit the planet's night side brighter than day. Fire cascaded through orbit, wreckage raining. Into Earth's atmosphere, both flagships vanished in the inferno. For long minutes, no one knew who had survived. Zerath forces faltered, leaderless, their formation broken. Humanity seized the moment, driving their battered ships into the gaps, hammering until alien vessels began to scatter. On Earth's surface, resistance fighters watched burning debris streak across the skies like falling stars. Some wept, believing their captain gone. Others raised weapons, inspired by his final charge. But Saraathis was not gone. Through the chaos, through smoke and fire, her escape pod detached from the ruined obsidian crown, vanishing into the black. Wounded but alive, she fled into shadow, carrying, with her the secret growing inside, and as for Daniel Rourke, no one knew. The skies above Earth were choked with fire. Shattered hulls burned as they fell, streaking across the atmosphere like meteors. Oceans swallowed wreckage, mountains glowed with the heat of re-entry, and the soil itself was scarred with molten craters. The battle had ended, but its echoes still thundered in every broken ship and every heart that survived. Humanity had done the impossible. The Zerath fleet was gone, splintered, scattered, or fleeing. Earth, scarred but unbroken, belonged once again to its children. For the first time in generations, the blue planet was not a prison under alien rule, but a symbol of victory, and yet victory was bitter. The Valkyrie too was gone, reduced to molten fragments buried in the bones of the obsidian crown. Thousands of resistance fighters had died to make the strike possible. Entire squadrons were erased, names known only to the void. Families reunited on the ground were forced to face the truth that their saviors had not survived to see them. Atop the ruins of old New York, now half submerged under rising seas, survivors lit beacons. Great pyres of twisted steel burned in. Silent salute to those who had fallen. Among them, whispers spread. Daniel Rourke lives. No one could prove it. Some said they'd caught fragments of a distress signal before the Valkyrie's systems collapsed. Others swore a life pod had been seen ejecting at the last moment, swallowed by the chaos. Whether true or false, it didn't matter. The story became fuel. For a people who had clawed their way back from extinction, hope was a weapon stronger than guns. The Zerath, once feared as gods, were broken. Deprived of their queen's command, their fleets fractured into warring factions. Colonies that once trembled under their shadow rose up in rebellion. The galaxy watched with astonishment as the prey species, fragile, reckless humans, turned from hunted to hunter. But far from Earth, in the dark reaches between stars, the queen still lived. Saraathis had escaped, her body battered, her throne reduced to fragments. She drifted through the void aboard a stolen cruiser, alone with her secret. Her empire believed her dead, her generals tearing each other apart for power. But she carried within her the truth that would rewrite everything: life. Half Zerath, half human. The impossible child. She stood in silence before a viewport, one clawed hand resting against her abdomen as stars wheeled past. She could still hear Daniel's voice in her memory, raw and unyielding. Humans don't kneel. Her mandibles curled into something that was not laughter, not mockery, something heavier. For the first time in her life, she questioned her destiny. Was she still the destroyer of species, or had she become the mother of something new? On Earth, humanity rebuilt. Ruined cities became fortresses. Shipyards rose from the oceans, welding together fleets not to hide, but to strike outward. Engineers studied captured Zerath technology, fusing it with human ingenuity. A generation who had grown up under alien chains now grew up watching stars with hunger in their eyes. They weren't content with survival anymore. Survival was the past. The future was expansion. And in that future, the legend of the hybrid began to spread. Rumors carried by traders and smugglers spoke of an heir to both worlds, of a child who would walk taller than men and fiercer than Zerath, a child born of fire and defiance. Some claimed the Queen would use it as a weapon. Others believed it would be a bridge, a chance for peace between predator and prey. No one knew the truth, but everyone knew one thing. If it existed, it would change the galaxy forever. At a memorial built on the ruins of the old UN headquarters, survivors etched names into stone. Daniel Rourke's was among the first. Children touched the carved letters and asked who he was. The answer came with a quiet, reverent fire. He was the man who taught us to fight, the one who made even a queen remember fear. And as night fell, the skies above Earth shimmered with auroras born from the dying breath of wrecked ships. Survivors lifted their eyes and saw not death, but dawn. The dawn fire had lit more than the battle. It had lit humanity's future. From now on, the galaxy would never see humans as prey again. They had faced the impossible, struck it down, and stood taller for it. The new dawn had come, and somewhere in the darkness, a queen no longer laughing carried the living proof of what humans had always known. The void above Mars burned with wreckage. Human warships, once symbols of defiance, floated as twisted corpses, their hulls cracked and leaking atmosphere like silent screams into the abyss. The sky over the red planet was a graveyard, and in that graveyard, the conquerors had arrived. The Zerath Dominion descended like a plague of fire. Their fleets were monstrous, black spires bristling with energy lances, wings of living metal, warships that breathed ion storms. To the scattered survivors hiding in the shadows of ruined colonies, it felt less like an invasion and more like the wrath of gods. On the shattered remains of Fortress Atlas, humanity's last command station, the air was stale with recycled smoke and the stench of blood. The walls groaned under pressure leaks patched with scrap metal and desperation. Soldiers limped through dark corridors, holding rifles that had seen too many battles. Medical crews dragged wounded men past flickering lights, whispers following them. Is this the end? At the heart of the station, inside a chamber that once directed fleets across the solar system, stood Captain Daniel Rourke. His uniform was torn, his left arm wrapped in a bloodied sling, but his eyes burned with the kind of defiance only humans carried in extinction's shadow. Around him were a handful of officers. No more admirals, no more presidents. Just survivors. The BO chamber door shuddered. Metallic claws tore through the steel as if it were paper. The survivors raised their weapons, but what came through made their breath freeze. The Zerath warriors were giants, towering insectoid forms with segmented armor glistening like obsidian. Their mandibles clicked in rhythm, a sound that was half war drum, half executioner's blade. Behind them walked the queen, Sarathes. 8 feet tall, her body was a fusion of elegance and terror. Her exoskeleton gleamed with an oily sheen that reflected firelight, her 4 eyes glowing molten gold. She moved with the confidence of an empire that had devoured worlds, her long blade-tipped tail slicing grooves into the floor with each step. Haboa humans opened fire. Bullets ricocheted uselessly off her armor. Plasma rounds sizzled against her hide like rain on stone. Sarathes lifted one clawed hand, and a pulse of energy swept the chamber. Weapons were ripped from human hands, clattering to the ground as though bowing before her. She laughed. It wasn't a laugh of humor. It was low, guttural, vibrating through the air like the growl of a storm. The Zerath soldiers echoed her with sharp clattering of their mandibles, the sound rolling across the chamber like thunder. Sarathes studied the broken humans before her. "So fragile," she said, her voice reverberating like iron scraping on stone. "You build your fragile shells of metal, you call them fleets, and you dare resist us? The Zerath are eternal. You are dust." Her gaze fell upon Daniel. Unlike the others, he hadn't lowered his head. He met her gaze with steady defiance. She tilted her head, curious. A human officer? Tell me, what is it that drives your kind to fight when the end is certain? Fear? Madness? Daniel wiped blood from his lip, squared his shoulders, and answered, Because we're human, and humans don't kneel. The chamber went silent. For the briefest moment, Sarathas's smile widened, sharp teeth glinting. She stepped closer, towering over him. Interesting. Do you believe your kind strong enough to stand beside us, to breed among the Zerath? Your flesh would snap beneath ours. You could not even give life to our kind. Her soldiers erupted, in cruel laughter, mandibles clashing in mockery. But Daniel didn't look away. His voice was raw, steady. Try us. You might find humans survive in ways you can't imagine. For the first time, Sarathas's laughter was not cruel. It was amused. A low ripple that seemed to shake the chamber. She leaned close, her breath carrying the scent of alien fire. Bold words for a dying man. Perhaps I'll keep you alive, long enough to prove them false. She turned away, her soldiers following, their claws clattering on metal. But her words lingered, echoing through the wreckage. The human survivors looked to Daniel, a mix of awe and disbelief in their eyes. He said nothing, but inside a fire was lit. Humanity was broken, yes, outnumbered, crushed, their fleets scattered. But as long as they could still defy, as long as even one human stood tall, the fight wasn't over. And though no one knew it yet, that defiance had planted a seed, not just of rebellion, but of something that would shake the galaxy. Because, for the first time in her long reign, Queen Sarathas had not dismissed her prey. She had noticed them, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war that followed was not a war in the old sense. It wasn't fought on clean battlefields or with clear front lines. Humanity no longer had the luxury of strategy drawn on star maps. The Zerath burned those maps with every strike. When the Dominion swept across the solar frontier, they didn't conquer planets. They gutted them. Terraforming stations were stripped for fuel. Mining colonies vanished into ash. Civilian transports were split open in orbit and left to bleed atmosphere, while Zerath harvesters sifted through wreckage for resources. On Earth, the governments collapsed within months. What was left of the United Nations fled underground, their words powerless against the shrieking fire of the alien armada. Humanity's proud fleets, once 100 strong, dwindled to scraps. Patched together destroyers and freighters turned into makeshift carriers. But scraps could cut. Captain Daniel. Rourke didn't die on Fortress Atlas. Instead, he carried the ember of defiance into the dark. With him gathered those who refused surrender. Rogue pilots, engineers who turned broken machinery into weapons, miners who had lost families to Zerath fire. They weren't an army, they were a wound. And wounds hurt when you pressed too hard. Their first strike was at the asteroid belt of Ceres. The Zerath had built a fueling hub, guarded by hulking frigates bristling with plasma turrets. Daniel's fleet had only 5 ships, one of which could barely keep its reactor from melting. But they didn't attack with brute force. They used deception. Small drones disguised as debris drifted into the fueling station's docking lanes. At first, the Zerath ignored them. What were a few scraps in the void? But when the drones split open, revealing fusion cores wired as bombs, it was too late. The explosion gutted the station, spilling Zerath frigates into chaos. Human ships slipped through the confusion, firing rail slugs at engines, targeting weak points in the joints of alien armor. They didn't destroy the entire fleet, but they didn't need to. They lit a message across the system. Humanity still fights, the Dominion noticed. From then on, Daniel's ragged force lived in constant motion. They jumped from system to system, never staying long enough to be cornered. In the skies of Titan, they hid among methane storms, striking at supply convoys before vanishing again. At the edge of Europa's frozen plains, they lured patrols into underground ice tunnels, where ambushes shredded the larger Zerath. The victories were small, but each one mattered. With every wrecked frigate, with every stolen cache of supplies, whispers spread through the survivors. Humanity wasn't extinct. Not yet. Sarathis watched all of it from her throne aboard the Obsidian Crown, her command vessel. Her generals seethed with fury at these humiliations. To them, the human gnats were an insult to Zarath dominance, but the Queen's reaction was different. When she read the reports, her laughter filled the chamber. They sting. Do you not see? For such small creatures, their bite carries poison. Her commanders begged to deploy full armadas to hunt Daniel down, but Sarathis forbade it. She wanted to see how long the humans could endure. She wanted to watch this Captain Rourke bleed his stubborn defiance across the stars. And secretly, she wanted to test whether her words in Fortress Atlas had been wrong. For Daniel, the cost was heavy. Every raid took lives. Every jump left behind bodies. He had to make decisions that clawed at him, abandoning colonies too exposed to save, sacrificing ships to give the rest a chance to escape. His crew followed him anyway, not because they believed in survival, but because they believed in his refusal to kneel. One night, while orbiting a dead world lit only by the light of distant suns, Daniel stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie. Around him, his officers argued about fuel, ammunition, the impossibility of continuing. He silenced them with 3 words: extinction or defiance. It wasn't a choice. It was a truth. Humanity had no future in submission. The only path forward was to hurt the enemy until hurting them wasn't enough, until they bled. And so, the fire spread. By the time the second year of the war closed, the Zirath had lost not only ships, but pride. What they had thought a simple extermination turned into a thorn lodged in their empire's flesh. Daniel's defiance had grown into something greater. From scattered miners on Io to exiled fleets hiding near Neptune, humans began to rise, following the example of the man who had dared to mock the Queen herself. Sarathis still laughed, yes, but in the quiet between battles, when her laughter faded, something else lingered. The knowledge that this war was no longer a simple conquest. Humanity had transformed survival into resistance. The Battle of Kepler 62F was meant to be impossible. 4 Zarath dreadnoughts, each the size of a small city, orbited the lush, ocean-covered world. Humanity's fleet was outnumbered 10-1, and yet Daniel Rourke refused retreat. His plan was reckless: use the planet's massive gravity well as a weapon. They came screaming out of hyperspace with engines overcharged, their hulls rattling as if the ships themselves feared the maneuver. Human destroyers swarmed forward, firing torpedoes not at the enemy, but at carefully mapped chunks of ice and rock floating in orbit. Explosions sent debris tumbling. When the dreadnoughts shifted formation to avoid the storm, the real strike hit. The Valkyrie and her escorts ignited their drives at the perfect angle, slingshotting a comet through the heart of the enemy fleet. The impact was catastrophic, an eruption brighter than the local sun. 2 dreadnoughts cracked open like eggshells. The others were hurled into the planet's upper atmosphere, burning as gravity claimed them. The price was steep. Half the human fleet never made it back to stable orbit. Engines failed, hulls split, and escape pods dotted the sky. Daniel's own ship staggered under enemy fire. Plasma blasts tore through the stern, shredding reactors. The bridge went dark. Alarms screamed. "Captain, abandon ship!" shouted his first officer. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet." He triggered the self-destruct sequence on the remaining torpedoes, detonating them to cripple the last dreadnought. It bought humanity their first clear victory in years, at the cost of his freedom. The Valkyrie was boarded before the evacuation could complete. Zirath warriors stormed through fire and smoke, dragging survivors from wreckage. Daniel fought, until his rifle clicked empty, until his knife snapped against alien armor. When they slammed him into chains, his mouth still carried blood and defiance. They didn't kill him. They brought him to her. The throne chamber of Queen Cerathis was a cavern of black steel and living roots, the walls pulsing with faint bioluminescence. The air smelled of oil and ash. She sat upon a seat grown from alien bone, her silhouette framed by burning crimson light. When Daniel was thrown at her feet, she leaned forward like a predator savoring prey. "You," she said, her voice a blade, across the silence. "The human who makes my generals choke on their pride?" Daniel forced himself to his feet. His wrists bled where the chains cut, but his back stayed straight. "Name's Rourke. I didn't expect royalty would care about one man." Her mandibles curved in what passed for a smile. "Care? No. But curiosity? Yes. You lead your kind to strike against my fleets. You fight until your bones crack. Do you know what you are to us? Food. Noise. Nothing." He spat blood at the floor. "Funny. For nothing, I cost you 4 dreadnoughts." Her laughter filled the chamber. Deep, vibrating, almost musical. "You bleed, yet you bare your teeth. A beast cornered. Tell me, why fight when defeat is inevitable?" Daniel's answer came like stone. "Because extinction isn't in our nature. We bite until we kill or die. Either way, we make damn sure the galaxy remembers we were here." Silence stretched. Her generals hissed with fury, demanding his execution. But Cerathis raised one claw and silenced them. Her eyes never left Daniel. She kept him alive. Days blurred into weeks. He was interrogated, paraded through her ship, questioned about human strategies. But Daniel never broke. Sometimes he gave lies to send the Zerath chasing, shadows. Other times he simply stared back, silent. What unnerved them most was his refusal to show fear. Cerathis visited often. At first, to taunt him, then to challenge him, soon to debate him. They argued about power, about survival, about what made a species worthy of legacy. She mocked humanity's frailty, and he countered with their resilience. She scoffed at love and loyalty, and he told stories of families who fought side by side until their last breath. Somewhere in those nights, something shifted. The queen who had laughed at him began to look longer, to pause before speaking. The human who swore he'd never kneel began to notice that beneath her armored form was a mind as restless as his own. One night, after a particularly brutal interrogation, where Daniel endured hours of psychic probing, Cerathis dismissed her guards. She approached him alone, her golden eyes narrowed. "You should be broken by now," she said softly. "Why do you endure?" His voice was raw but steady. "Because you want me broken, and I won't give you what you want." For the first time, Cerathis didn't laugh. She reached out, clawed hand brushing against the iron shackles that bound him. Her touch lingered, alien yet deliberate. The silence between them was heavier than any chain. Something unthinkable sparked there, between conqueror and captive, between predator and prey. Not peace, not trust, but a fire neither of them could name. By the time Daniel was smuggled out by a human strike team weeks later, leaving Cerathis staring into the void where he had stood, she was no longer laughing for the same reason. She carried within her an impossible truth. The human's defiance had left more than scars. It had left life, and that life would divide empires. The queen of the Zerath dominion was never meant to know doubt. Cerathis had commanded fleets that devoured suns, shattered moons, and bent entire species to her will. Her word was law. Her body was perfection engineered through generations of dominance. Nothing could challenge her. Nothing should. Yet something impossible grew within her. At first, she thought it a sickness. Nights brought waves of weakness she had never known. Her body, which could withstand plasma storms, now trembled. When her healers examined her, their mandibles clicked in alarm. Blood samples revealed DNA markers they could not explain. Whispers spread. The Queen, corrupted. The Queen, tainted. Some called for the offspring's immediate termination. Others demanded she purge the anomaly herself. But Sarathis silenced them all with a single slash of her blade-tipped tail. She dismissed her court and brooded in silence. In the dark chamber of her ship, she ran clawed hands across her armored abdomen and felt it. Life. A pulse that was not entirely Zerath. It was something else. Something born of defiance, of fire, of the human who had looked at her and refused to bow, Daniel Rourke. The thought of him was infuriating, yet also intoxicating. She remembered his words, his stubborn refusal to break. She had wanted to crush him, and instead he had left an imprint deeper than any wound. Her generals sensed weakness. In strategy halls, they began to argue louder, to press their own wills. "This infestation of humans must be ended quickly," one commander hissed. "Every day they raid our supply lines, our fleets bleed. We risk becoming a laughingstock." Sarathis rose from her throne and silenced him with a single stare. "We do not risk. We rule, and I will decide when humanity ends." But in private, the war inside her grew sharper. Was the life within her a weapon or a weakness? Would her empire destroy her if they knew? Meanwhile, Daniel returned to the resistance with scars that told their own story. He said nothing about what had passed in captivity. His people only knew he had survived where no one should, and that survival became legend. Human forces prepared their boldest plan yet. Operation Dawnfire. The target was Earth itself, still chained under Zerath control. It wasn't just about reclaiming a home. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity could do the impossible. The plan was madness. A fractured fleet of scavenged ships against the Dominion's central garrison. But madness was all humanity had left. Engineers turned mining drills into railguns. Civilians volunteered for kamikaze runs. Even children helped by loading ammo or patching hulls. For the first time since the war began, the survivors didn't just prepare to hide, they prepared to strike. Sarathis felt it coming. In her chamber, visions burned in her mind. Futures of fire, futures of ruin. She could sense Daniel's hand in it, his defiance spreading like a virus through his people. She stood before a mirror of obsidian, staring at her reflection. 8 feet of terror, the embodiment of Zerath dominance, now carrying an unborn hybrid that her empire would slaughter. If they ever learned, why? She whispered to herself, though she hated the sound of weakness in her voice. The answer came from memory, from a voice raw with defiance, telling her that humans don't kneel. For the first time in her reign, she doubted which side she wanted to see prevail. When the human fleet launched Dawnfire, it was like watching sparks leap from dry kindling. Hundreds of ships, barely functional, patched together with desperation, shot across the void toward Earth. And Sarathis did nothing to warn her commanders. Her generals noticed. "Queen, why do we not crush them before they arrive? Why do we wait?" she answered coldly. "Because I wish to watch them burn with my own eyes." But deep inside, she wondered what would happen if they did not burn. The child within her moved, as if answering the question. A flicker of life, half Zerath, half human, a contradiction that should not exist, and yet did. The Queen of the Dominion, conqueror of worlds, felt something she had not in centuries. Fear. And in that fear, the seeds of change grew.